So Michael Popok with the Legal AF Hot Take. Donald Trump better watch out. Judge Chutkan, in her strongest messaging yet concerning Jan 6th, just said in a courtroom when sentencing Scott Miller, a violent member of the Proud Boys who attacked the Capitol and Capitol Police, that Jan 6th and the threat to democracy can happen again. And she's worried about that, and that's on her mind. Donald Trump better wake up, because his trial in the D.C. election interference case is being presided over by somebody, Judge Chutkan, who has a vast and deep experience in the Jan 6 defendants, their cases, their trials, their sentencing. She knows every scrap of the footage of what happened down there. She's seen all of the social media posts. She's seen all of the social media videos. There's no better person, in my view, to preside over the case of Donald Trump than Tanya Chutkan. And we can gain a lot of understanding about what goes on in her brain, as she is a fair and impartial jurist, but has, of course, the experience now of having sentenced somebody like Scott Miller to her harshest sentence so far, 66 months, for his being at the time, a Nazi sympathizer, somebody that hated Jews and other minorities, who wrote about trying to protect white supremacy in this country, that led him on this violent ideology, and at the Western Terrace, battling it out medieval style with Capitol and Metro Police and injuring at least 5 of them. Let me just, before I get back to Chutkan and then tie it to the Donald Trump trial, because this is now the second instance that we've had in the last 2 weeks where Judge Chutkan has been heard from in Jan 6 related matters. The Department of Justice, in their news release, puts it this way about Scott Miller, age 37, from Millersville, Maryland. How appropriate. 66 months in prison, 36 months of supervised release, and 2,000 in restitution. He had already pled guilty on January the 5th, 2024. So close. According to the documents and him being indicted, the indictment itself, he left his home on Jan 6th, a member of the Proud Boys. He ended up at the Lower West Terrace Tunnel, the site of some of the most violent assaults on law enforcement officers that occurred on Jan 6. He wore an orange ski goggles, black hooded sweatshirt under a tan coat, a tan backpack, black and red neck gaiter, dark colored pants, and black motorcycle gloves. At the entrance, he joined the crowd of rioters who were attacking the Metro Police and the Capitol Police. Court documents say that at approximately 4:27 p.m., Miller struck a Capitol Police officer, Metro Police officer, multiple times with a long wooden pole. After that assault, he threw at least 5 objects at the police in the tunnel, including a metal pipe or pole, a bottle, a short wooden stick, a large black speaker, and an article of clothing. But he wasn't done. Let me take time out for a minute. For people like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Donald Trump to say that these were, and even Robert F. Kennedy Jr., to say that these are patriots, political prisoners, listen to the violence and mayhem that they used against law enforcement as they tried to assassinate elected officials. 5 minutes later, Miller then struck multiple police officers who were defending the tunnel several times by swinging and jabbing a long blue and white pole at their heads. So first he had a wooden pole, now he's got a blue and white metal pole, and then he grabbed a hold of a police shield being held by 2 officers. He pulled the shield out of their hands, and after a brief struggle, ripped the shield away from the officers. He then carried the shield back into the crowd behind him and handed it to another rioter. And so when it came time for Judge Chutkan, who now had before her somebody who claimed to be rehabilitated, after I just gave you that description, he claims that through his ex-wife, who's some sort of psychotherapist, that he's given up his violent ideology. He has a second wife, 20 weeks pregnant. 20 of his relatives came to court and, stood before them. And the judge said, look, I believe in redemption, but I also believe in punishment fitting the crime. And this can happen again, and I've got to send the appropriate signal related to that. So this is the statements that we know were made by Judge Chutkan, in that courtroom, which I think is a good gives us a good understanding of the judge that's going to be presiding over the case for Donald Trump. She said the evidence of Miller's violent ideology, his embrace of Nazism, his support that all Washington, D.C. residents should be executed, troubled her, despite his insistence that he had disavowed any of his prior positions. She went on to say that in her belief, that the Jan 6 mob attack was close to as serious a crisis as this nation has ever faced. Right? This is the judge. It's as close to as serious a crisis as this nation has ever faced, and that it could happen again. She says the officers who protected the Capitol faced horrendous circumstances. They were assaulted, spat on, beaten, kicked, gassed. They are patriots, and that it can happen again. The judge said extremism is alive and well in this country. Threats of violence continue unabated. She didn't say by whom, but we can put two and two together. When Miller got up there, as they often do after they're caught, convicted, and now being tried, there was a lot of like blubbering and crying, and I want to do well for my family, and I've got a new child on the way. And Chutkan, echoed, she's got a heart. There's mercy in the court. She said she echoed the sentiment about after imposing her sentence. She said it would be a hardship on her wife and future child, people who did not ask for this. She said that having a child is a life-changing event, and they don't really care about what you did. They just love you. She went on to say that she hopes that he continues his turning away from the path of violent ideology, and every person is capable of redemption. That's the judge going to be presiding over the case of Donald Trump. Now, let me give you how that gets back to her. It's the currently four counts, 2 for obstruction of an official proceeding against Donald Trump, 2 for conspiracy to commit election fraud. The 2 counts for related to the 1512 obstruction of an official proceeding is currently being litigated, and we'll get a ruling from the U.S. Supreme Court about whether that count is going to be appropriate against the Jan 6 defendants and whether there's a way to save it against Donald Trump. In any event, there'll be more motion practice and appeals related to those 2 counts on Donald Trump's indictment. The other 2 counts and the rest of it, Donald Trump, of course, has an immunity motion to dismiss that was rejected by the Court of Appeals by a 3-judge panel and is now being heard at the United States Supreme Court on full briefing on the 25th of April. We expect a ruling in late May or early June before the Supreme Court goes on holiday. Despite what's going on in America, they go on holiday, and their term is October till June. So once they decide, let's say they decide end of May, beginning of June, let's say it's against Donald Trump and the immunity, they find no immunity that a former president has for indictments related to official conduct, or they find his conduct is outside of official conduct while he was in office, at least the indicted conduct, then Judge Chutkan, this same person I just given you an outline about her thinking, is going to call a hearing involving Donald Trump's D.C. election interference criminal defense lawyers, led by John Lauro, and maybe Todd Blanche, maybe Chris Keiss, and the special counsel's office with Jack Smith on the other side, for the purpose of resetting the trial. She's already said that she's going to add 90 days to give Donald Trump more prep time, depending upon when she gets the mandate to reset the case for trial. By that time, the New York criminal political election interference case that starts this coming week will be concluded. That's going to take about 6, 7, 8 weeks. Let's call it 8 weeks at the outset. So that really is going to end by June. By the time Judge Chutkan gets the lawyers back in her courtroom, it may not be until, let's say, July or late June. And then she'll be able to set that trial for 90 days after that. We're getting dangerously close to November 5th. Not to say the judge would care about that. I think she starts that trial, whether it's August, September, or October. I think she starts the trial. I don't think she delays it waiting to see what happens on November 5. And by that time, Donald Trump will either be a convicted felon in New York or he won't be. He'll be exonerated. We'll have to see. But we'll follow it all on MeidasTouch on Legal AF, our podcast at the intersection of law and politics that we bring to you every Wednesday and Saturday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. You want to find out why we call it Legal AF? Join us. You'll find out. We curate the best 5 developments or so at the intersection of law and politics, and we bring it to you right here, sort of like this. These are my hot takes. If you like what I'm doing, I'm Michael Popok. Give me a thumbs up. Leave a comment. It signals to the algorithmic gods that you like what we're doing. Go over to my playlist on the MeidasTouch network. Look for Popok playlist contributors, and you'll find, 1,200 of my body of work there. And then we got a new Patreon. If you want to get down to the building blocks and molecular level, really for non-lawyers, but lawyers alike, of the legal principles, state and federal, criminal and civil, arbitration and otherwise, everything that you've heard about on Legal AF. You want to learn more about those things? We got a patreon.com/legalaf new Patreon for the cup of, a cup of coffee in Manhattan every month. Ben Meiselas and I will come to you with tutorials, instructional videos, teachable moments, TED Talks meets law school, whatever you want to call it. And that's on patreon.com. So until my next Legal AF, until my next hot take, until my next Patreon exclusive content, this is Michael Popok reporting. Heary, heary, Legal AF Law Breakdown is now in session. Go beyond the headlines and get a deep dive into the important legal concepts you need to know, and we discuss every day on Legal AF. Exclusive content you won't find anywhere else, all for the price of a couple of cups of coffee. Join us at patreon.com/legalaf. That's patreon.com/legalaf.